when you're looking to create like really complex software using LLMs, it's important to take away as much of the complexity from the LLM as possible. If you would need to give like a very long and complex speech, obviously, it will be easier to speak at your native language. Every large organization has tons of software needs. Think of an organization like Pepsi or something like that, right? The more that you build tools, the more that you build automations, the more that the business becomes more efficient. When you build a web app in Base44, you already have everything you need to make it functional: user management, a database, integrations with sending emails or leveraging LLMs and analytics and logs and all those kind of things.
So with all of these advancements and all the capabilities that Base44 is building, like what's your prediction about how long does it take till you can build a Base44 with Base44? Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the AI Native Dev. Today, we have a really fun episode where we'll talk a little bit about sort of startups and entrepreneurship. We'll talk about building in sort of AI-powered ways and vibe coding and kind of this brave new world, but also how do you actually build a company and use AI to make that a possibility. And to talk about all of that, we have Maor Shlomo, who is the founder of Base44. Tell us a little bit about what Base44 is and what was different about how you built it? Or not how you built it, but rather the thing that you built.
Base44 is an AI app builder, kind of like the text to app that you see a lot these days. I think we're taking a very different approach, a very opinionated approach, which is help people build actual full stack functional applications.
Mhm.
So sometimes the way I like to put it in perspective is saying vibe coding has been awesome at first for building websites and building user interfaces and some MVPs, like mainly front end. And then Base44 was, I think, the first one, but maybe one of the first ones to introduce this concept of batteries included app builder, which means that when you build a web app in Base44, you already have everything you need to make it functional already built in. So user management, a database, integrations with like sending emails or leveraging LLMs and analytics and logs and all those kind of things that you need when you're actually building a fully functional or even complex application. And that's what Base44 basically does. It's helping users create software that either they or their users or customers are going to use day to day.
And is it more about the choice of the opinionated stack? Hey, I chose a database, I chose all these other aspects, or is it about the continuation? Because I know you also you deploy an application, you kind of handle the operational aspect of it. Do they have to go hand in hand? Is it how do you see the interaction between like the choice of stack and managing the operation of it as well?
Yeah, I think it's to some degree both. I think the choice of stack will become less important throughout times. So, like, I can see that with our developer community as they gain more trust in what Base44 does, and like the fact that it's becoming slightly less and less important, like what's the tech stack that you're using and how you're going to handle deployment and those things. Because vibe coding is getting better. It's not perfect yet. It's still hard to build production applications. I think on Base44 it's slightly easier, but there's still a long way to go. And I think it's like this opinionated approach is basically trying to crack the actual experience of how you want vibe coding to look like. Like, you don't want to start stitching together different services and say, oh, you know what, now I want to connect an LLM. I need to go to OpenAI, bring my API key, feed it into the vibe coding platform, and I want to connect a database. I need to look at the tables and run migrations and stuff like that. Things that nobody really wants to deal with, or at least in the future. I'm imagining a future where those things are entirely being handled behind the scenes, and you can just literally build what you want to build and literally program in English without needing to understand again what an API key is and so on. Obviously, to do that, we had to take a lot of like opinionated decisions on the tech stack and so on.
And I'm still curious on how much is it that you are picking specific stacks that you have seen the LLM to be good at, or that you've just really invested in making LLMs create well with, versus where is it things that you've just taken out of the LLMs domain? Like I'll give an example. Like in Tessl, when we create software, for a while, we actually don't need that now, but it used to be that the LLMs just wouldn't stick to the dependencies we told them to do. It's like, hey, create this code here, use library A and B, and it would just sort of use B and Z and whatever. It would invent things, and until eventually we said, like, okay, you're not allowed to choose dependencies anymore. We'll put the import A, import B over there, and you fill in the rest. We've since removed that because they got better at it. But that was, like, to me, like commandeering control. Like, I guess, is it similar? Like the LLM just has nothing, has no choice, has no say in the choice of a database. You just have to use what you've been given, or is it about choosing a database that you made it use very, very well?
So I think one of the advantages of building Base44, I would say late to the game, is the fact that we really designed a lot of the things around the LLM. So Base44 obviously employs a concept called backend as a service, which is like for the devs probably familiar with like Firebase or Supabase and so on. But those are like products that were built pre the LLM era and had their own like endpoints and syntax and so on. And so when I started Base44 and started kind of like building the first couple of apps, and so you see what the LLM is trying to do, and in some places like you try to like limit it further, so you tell it like, hey, don't use those packages, and it tries to use those packages. So you like try to, I don't know, write in the prompt important exclamation point exclamation point exclamation point, like don't do that. Or the other way around, which I think worked really well for us, is like just run with it. Like see what the LLM is trying to do when it gets confused and build it almost in the same syntax that it's using. So for example, if it's constantly using like one package over another, and you're trying to use the other, but there's no real difference between those two, maybe the stack should be built with package A. So in some places, sometimes it's better to just go with whatever the LLM was trained on, because it will likely bring you better results. And I think a lot of the design of our SDK, our backend services, the packages, the tech stack, was more around what LLMs are really good at doing and writing code
Right.
with.
Yeah.
And I think this was an important decision because again, when you're looking to create like really complex software using LLMs, which obviously, as we all know in the space, LLMs are struggling with, it's important to take away as much of the complexity from the LLM as possible. And if you can make it easier, so think about it as like, think if you would need to give like a very long and complex speech, right? Obviously, it will be easier to speak at your native language. So that's what I try doing with the LLM, is like trying to understand what's the easiest way for the LLM to create functional software, and then build a tech stack, design the SDK, design the endpoints around that.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And it sounds like it's a bit of both of the things that I talked about. There's some backend as a service that is outside the scope of the LLM's decisions, at least as you build a Base44 application. But
Oh,
then,
100%.
and then on top of that, you have the sort of the choice of stacks that go with the flow, or go with sort of the I guess kind of prevalence and
Yeah.
knowledge in the and you've we're going to talk about your own tech stack, but you've chosen Python, for instance.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing that's sort of a similar logic of, like, Python was the language the LLMs are most proficient
Yeah.
at.
Yeah. For backend, yeah. For front end, there's also some controversial decisions that I've taken. So one of them is LLMs are having an easier time using writing JavaScript than writing TypeScript, and they get confused. So like a lot of our front end is still written only in JavaScript, which could can shake can shake some of
There are
the
firm opinions about this, and
yeah.
in the amidst the technologists
Yeah,
in
I'm
the domain.
sure. But also like things change, right? Like I think if we get back to like in the places where you actually limit the LLM, or you say, okay, to the LLM, okay, this is the building block that you should and can be used, like you should use, and nothing else besides that. So yeah, so as you mentioned, what you guys have seen in Tessl is like LLM get better and better, or change and adapt. And in some ways, like even in the tech stack that people build apps in Base44 these days, like as LLMs progress, we take away some of those guardrails to allow the LLM more flexibility.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And the maybe let's just sort of on Base44 still kind of as a user base. So the target audience of that is what? Is it non-developers? Is it developer adjacent but technical people? Is it none of the above? People that are entirely non-technical? Who did you build it for?
Definitely for the non-technical people. The first couple of users were like a restaurant manager, a marketing guy, like some of my best friends, right? But their connection to code was something distant. But I think what's surprising to me is that as time goes, I see more and more of like there's like a big community of like developers using Base44, and obviously as time goes, we're developing more features for like semi-developers, people who do understand like some technicalities. But I see a future where it's like it doesn't matter anymore. It's like if you look at like building a landing page or just a landing page, right? Think about it before the age of LLMs, right? Obviously, at some point, even if you're a developer, it would be easier to use Wix than to code a landing page. Even if you do know like HTML, PHP, whatever, and host it and deploy it and whatever, like nobody wants to do that. Me myself, even before LLMs were like vibe coding were a big thing, I built my girlfriend's website using Wix. And I think in some ways, for a large portion of software, that's what we'll see. So even if you're super technical, it will be an advantage when you're vibe coding stuff, but it won't matter that much. Like it will be clear that's an easier choice than to open up a new GitHub repository, start writing code,
Right.
deploy it, run tests,
why
and so
reinvent
on.
the wheel when you
Yeah.
But how do you think about, so for the non-technical user, trying to think about the sort of the lines, right? So if you're a developer, I think a lot of vibe coding, whether it is in platforms like Base44 or if it's things that you do more locally, the Cloud Code sort of cursors of the world, you in those worlds you have a very tight relationship to the code. The LLM modifies, the agents modify the code, but when there's a problem, your sort of supervision happens on the code. I think in Base44 you can see the code, but it is a kind of a hidden entity,
Yeah.
or it is not designed to put the code in your face too much. How have you seen, and what maybe there's like learnings about how you have built for people who don't understand code to be able, you know, to interact and get the system over the hump when it fails to deliver something, right? When it fails to accomplish something. Is it all just like give it more guidance, and hope it gets it right?
Yeah. Not only, I think the interaction when you're building an app in Base44 versus, for example, if you're building an app using Cloud Code or Cursor, it's a different interaction, and many times it's a different user, and a lot of times, currently, it's a different piece of software.
Mhm.
So I'll start with obviously the way that Base44's users do iterations and experimentations and so on has a lot to do with visual. Like you see the app in front of your face, you know if something is wrong, you'll see that in the interaction, or you'll see a bug being thrown away or something like that before you even look at the code. I think platforms like Base44, still there's obviously like a limited set of software that they can build. And this set is going to expand further and further and further as time goes, and that's what we're working on. But it's still important to be very honest and say there's a set of software that you'll be better off building using Cursor than using Base44. So, for example, Base44 itself, put aside the front end, which is obviously built using Base44, but the backend for Base44 is not built using Base44. It's like
Right.
built using Cursor and Cloud Code and so on. Because you need to look at the code and you need to understand the code and so.
Yeah.
This whole thing, like this is the situation and reality right now. I think this will aggressively change in the next few months even, but definitely few years. Again, as you'll be able to visually or like or prompts only, without looking at the code, you'll be able to build an increasing percentage of the software that you're currently building.
Right.
And so the tools that we're giving our users are a different set of tools to how they experiment and iterate with their software. It has to do a lot with visual. You have to see the application all the time. It has to do a lot with trying to explain better what's going on. So, for example, we have this small feature, but people really love it, where when you prompt something in Base44 and it starts coding, so obviously we like most of our users don't want to see the code. It's terrifying for them, so they don't understand what's going on. And so we have another small LLM that basically watches the coding agent, see what it does, and kind of like explains to you in real time like what's the coding agent's currently doing. And when it's like a small, like now it's changing the UI from light theme to dark theme and whatever. And so yeah, we're building a set of tools to help people build software without the need to look at code.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so smart. Progress indications and engagements are sort of super important. So I think that makes sense to me. If I echo this back, I feel you're saying there's sort of the two domains maybe that Base44 today is most helpful are cases where a lot of the validation and a lot of the decisions are much more product oriented and a lot more visual specifically oriented. And as opposed to sort of technical and how did you implement. And the second is that maybe a lot of them are places where that visual is also the innovation. Like a lot of the technology, you're not looking to make a product that sort of works. That's not some sort of the world's fanciest progressive web app that does a lot of things. A lot of your creation is a lot more about the content, the navigation, and all that might be sort of similar and common. And so the LLMs know how to do it well, and you can do it very efficiently. But you're innovating on sort of the content and the looks more. Does that sound fair? And then it will expand over time.
Definitely, but I'll add on top of that. I think it has more to do with the type of software that you're building, right? So if you're building nowadays something that's like performance is super important, right? Like you can't vibe code your way through it. Like it's like if you're building, I don't know, a VPN software. Let's take this for example. So obviously, like it's gonna be really hard, or something that relies very heavily on like backend and stuff like that. So the previous company probably can't vibe code Sneak. At least not yet. I think for other set of applications, it's not necessarily the visuals, but more of like if you're building an application that can do what it needs to do with a database, a set of integrations, APIs, and so on. I think like you'll be like you can do a really good job using Base44, and it will likely be an easier experience than try to code it via Cursor.
Right. Yeah.
So it has to do with like the low levelness of stuff and complexity on the backend side, but we are getting better at that.
So I have one more question on Base44, but maybe let's first switch to how you built it. We'll talk about your stack, and then we'll combine it a little bit. I'd like to touch a bit on longevity, on like building a disposable app. I think you're creative doing it versus what do you build for long term. But take us behind the scenes a sec. So you've built, like single person, built substantial platform and also scaled it. I guess tell us a bit of the tips and tricks. I heard you shared a few of what helped you create that, and maybe started with like, do you think you could have done this? I know you used AI your creation. Like, was that critical? Do you feel you could have pulled off a Base44 without AI dev help as a builder?
Short answer is definitely not. Or at least not in the same structure and way that I did it with Base44. So when I started Base44, even before knowing what I was going to do, I knew that we're in a different era. I've been like leveraging AI, working with AI in my previous company, both as like AI inside the product and also coding with AI.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt strongly that we're in a new era where it doesn't matter the number of people building software anymore. More matter about like if you have a unique take, unique product, kind of like, and you can design well, like design software well.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not speaking about like UI design. Then it's not anymore about like, hey, throw as many people at the problem as you can. Those people will write more code faster, and that's where you'll get to. So I was like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to do this alone. From day one, I'm going to set up the repository and spend 20% of my time constantly on how can I further increase the velocity and speed. So a lot of what I did is like experimentation with how LLMs write code better. Obviously, I did it for Base44's product as well,
Right.
but even for my own repository, right? So I find those tips and tricks is like what I've spoken about, like
Yeah.
JavaScript versus TypeScript. Maybe now it's changing with Cloud 4 and so on, but back then it's like I could write front ends like the speed of light just because of the setup.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing is I've built this from the backend side. I built this very high level infrastructure that handles like the database and user management and so on, so that even if I would have pivoted to a completely different idea, 80% of the code would stay the same. And so I had this like really good infrastructure that stayed the same. And those were like the parts of code that it was slightly more me than the AI actually writing and making sure
Mm-hmm.
that it's perfect. And from there, once you have those infrastructure, and so
Right.
now adding a new feature that I don't know has like a new table in a database and has some interaction with other parts of the platform became super easy. The way I would measure that is for the LLM to implement a new feature. I want it to write at the least code possible to implement the feature end to end. And so I built a lot of like those things, obviously, and the rules and so on into the repository so that I could run on my own, but still keep the same velocity as my competitors, if not even better, faster. And I think to some degree I've done that. Like I think the competitors in this category are super heavily funded. Um, and in many ways and aspects, Base 44 executed extremely fast, if not faster than a lot of the players in the
Right.
category. And I give a lot of credit to the AI. Like most of the credit is to the AI of
Well,
like
thank the AI
structuring
for sort of
it.
getting me
Yeah,
here.
yeah. I want to thank it.
Second Oscar. I get
Um,
the. I think
yeah,
so I love that. I guess again, kind of echoing back a little bit. I think the first thing you're sort of touting is like the value of a good architecture, where you anticipate what would be future changes, and you write the ability to write compartmentalized code. And I guess I'm hearing something that is almost similar, like to hiring either junior developers or outsourcing. Places in which if you build the right architecture, then you could have clear instructions to someone else who's maybe a little bit less trustworthy to write pieces of software within it and be able to assess whether they've done their job well and I guess, can be able to guide them. Does that sound like a fair
yeah,
analogy?
yeah. Exactly. Because also one other thing that like I've noticed is like when you're leveraging AI for coding. So think about it this way: like let's say you're building like a simple full stack web app, right? So you tell it, like, hey, I want it to be a to-do list app or whatever. So the AI implements like some of the routes and connects the front end and so on. And then you
Mm-hmm.
open up a new chat, right, in Cursor or something, and you want to implement another features like write an admin panel or so on. So it will look at your code and it will do the task. But an AI is really good at that. But AI is not really good at stop and saying, oh, you know what? There's actually like common concepts here that I could like
Right.
combine to like this infrastructure or package that I can later use in other features. And oh, I'm writing the same code again and again. like let's stop, and before I do like the task that you gave me, let's kind of like
I'll do
implement
some refactoring to
yeah,
whatnot.
let's refactor the code so that I won't need to write as much code and so on. So I think this is something that a lot of developers currently don't notice about AI. Like it will implement the task as you told it to,
Right.
but it's still lacking the hey, let's stop for a second. We need to refactor the code because I find this common layer or whatever. And I think that's
Yeah.
that's
And so
that's a nice way
that's
of
something
looking
you
at it.
still did manually. Like you would observe what the AI has built and you would kind of go off and modify it. A lot of what we see with AI, which I think touches on the topic you said right now, is about the initial creation, right? And it would go off. And even
Yeah,
there you sort of see this sort of reward seeking, right? It might burn down the house to sort of be able to accomplish this thing that you've just
yeah,
sort of like break all the other features, just to be able to make this
yeah,
feature you just asked it to make it work. But the other aspect is indeed maintainability. It's indeed code duplication. It's all these things that are sort of bad practices when it comes to sort of quality software creation. Um, so I guess I'm asking, like, I think you did it on your own in Base44 for your code base. How do you think about that in terms of building applications that are built by
yeah.
Base44 to have longevity?
So in two ways. One, when you build an app in Base44 these days, like there's a lot of infrastructure and setup that happens before the LLMs even writes code
Mm-hmm.
that in some ways limits it, but not really. Not in terms of like what it needs to, but it's kind of like it those are guardrails that the LLM should keep.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as it keeps that, then it should be fine to some degree. So again, we automatically create the entire uh, read, update, delete, kind of like the CRUD
Yeah.
SDK, and we make it like really good, and we implement like rate limits on top of that and things like that that LLMs wouldn't really care about. And when you leverage I don't know, APIs and integrations and so on. Like we keep a very strict schema. There's like a lot of things that we implemented built into the application so that the LLM won't kind of like be this reward seeking of like I'll do whatever, but
Yeah.
I'll keep your app exposed and so on. The other thing is yes, at some point we automatically feedback the LLM, whether the user knows about it or not, that it needs to refactor something. So, for example, one of the things that makes LLM confused the most, and people feel that it like across the vibe coding categories, when they're saying like, "Hey, I asked it to do something, it didn't do it, it did the opposite, it deleted a feature or whatever," is when code files are getting too long.
Right.
Right? If like you've implemented, so you ask it initially or early on, hey, implement this page, create a to-do list app, and it did something simple, it's like a very simple to-do list app like in any other React,
Right.
and then start layering in features, right? So the LLM does what you asked it to, and it started adding like AI features to write the task description, and then user management to like assign different teams and boards and whatever. And at some point, you have like if you're not careful, you might have like this very large code file. And
Right.
so one of the things is like we're running behind the scenes refactoring tests to maybe tell the LLM, hey, like you passed the threshold, you should now refactor this file. Even if like, okay, the user asks you something, first refactor the file, then implement what the user has asked you to. And I think like there's a lot more to do there. But yeah, it's somewhat of like this code quality agent that's keep nudging the LLM at some points if it finds that it's past the threshold of like, hey, like there's this code here and this code here, like do something, refactor that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It makes sense. I think hey, a couple of questions about specs and tests. So we talk a lot about specs here. It's kind of Tessl's kind of a claim for existence
Yeah.
of it. Products coming soon, and we. I think in general, there's also like growing appreciation in the world of AI development that you want to capture knowledge that's outside your code or summaries of it and then tests as guardrails. I guess how have you used maybe tests for sure and maybe specs as part of creation in Base44? maybe we'll start with tests even, right? Like how do you think
Yeah.
about tests?
I think just like the way you guys think at Tessl, I think is like software is changing, right? So some of the paradigms that we've built throughout the years are not really relevant anymore. Some of them become like more relevant. But even if you look at test-driven development, it will likely look very different. So in the first few months of Base44, there were no unit tests. um, there were like very different tests. So a lot of the tests were an actual agent going into a browser, opening up a local host, like a local version of Base44, tries different features, and the way that I'll write tests would be like prompts saying like, hey, when a user first logs in with a new, and that's a first user, make sure this pop-up exists. Go into the homepage, write a prompt, run it, then you should see in less than 3 minutes, you should see like this and that. And so a lot of the tests that I built early on inside base, even for Base44, to keep velocity high but still maintain a quality piece of software, were like end-to-end tests that are not even they're not written with code. It's like more high level. Tell an agent go into a browser and test it.
Interesting.
Obviously, at some
Is
point,
there a reason for that? Was that just sort of reality? You needed the end-to-end tests anyway, and then so you might as well spare yourself the need to create the unit tests,
yeah,
or is it sort of some
because
fundamental like I don't think unit tests are right for it because I don't care about the implementation as much.
so yeah, because implementation changes, and so I was changing the code so much throughout the day that like keeping a set of unit tests would have been more of a headache than that you
Yeah.
constantly need to refactor, and you constantly. And so what you want to at the end of the day, what you want to make sure is that your code works, and when it doesn't, that you can easily get to the what doesn't work, right? That's some of the reason behind unit tests is it's easier to understand, oh, this unit failed, so you know where even in the code is the problem that you're having, because otherwise okay, just write as many end-to-end flows, and if those work, then your software does what it should be doing. um, and so I think that's why a lot of at the first few months when I was refactoring so much, I was I found this way of doing end-to-end tests that really is scalable, almost as if you had a team of manual QA engineers that you could go into your software and change things. Obviously, if you want to scale and you want to work inside a team, unit tests are important. They're explaining some of the things that should happen with your software, and especially when backend becomes really large and complex.
So and these this way that you found to sort of run the end-to-end test, was that also AI powered? Is that sort of
Yeah.
browser based? Hey, find a button and press the button and such, as
Yeah.
opposed to telling it whatever the DOM ID
Yeah,
of it.
and when you absolutely, and when you're changing the UI a lot and so on, and it's more around the logic. And AI agents running browsers nowadays are pretty good with the logic. So even if I remember UI testing used to look like you'd have this HTML selector, like a jQuery selector. Well, to find a button, then you change something, the whole test would break, and you'd spend 20, 30, 40% of your time just refactoring the tests after you change the UI a lot. And so, yeah, I think I'm still wrapping my head around this. I'm not sure that we're doing a great job with rethinking how things change as AI is writing more and more code.
Yeah.
I think also part of it is part of the reason why I haven't built a lot of unit tests starting on is again, AI does a really good job with also identifying. If you tell it what the bug is, it will search and it will try and understand, and you'll get really fast to where does this happens. I think that's also part of the reason why I haven't invested a lot of time in unit tests. But I'm not sure this is the right. I'm more I have stronger opinions on other stuff. I'm not sure we've yet to crack testing and how it looks like in this new new
And
age.
how do you think about specs, or sort of, I guess docs are the sort of the more core. Did you find that you got benefit from creating documentation in a more standard way? I guess what has been the experience?
Yeah, this is really interesting. I think angle and space, as I see also a lot of like Base44's users. Sometimes I see what they're doing is like they'll go and chat with ChatGPT. They'll build like some sort of like a PRD or something like that, or a spec of like what they're looking to build, and only then they'll upload it to Base44, because Base44 is slightly more tipping towards action, I'll say. So even if you
Yeah,
say, hey, like, let's chat a bit about the app that we
it
want to
didn't
build, and
stop
maybe
think.
we'll, yeah, maybe we'll add this stage before creating an app. Like if you want to just chat about it before and create some spec, and then make sure that throughout time, as you build your app and adapt it and whatever, like the LLM constantly sees and validates that the spec is still happening in reality. I think that's also one of like the top requested features that I've yet to wrap my head around as to how to approach it. Is like have some sort of like a spec of what your app should be doing, and then even if you like when you ask the LLM to make it prettier or change the button or add functionality or whatever, it should constantly get back to the spec and make sure that it's not does not overrides or changes anything,
Mm-hmm.
because obviously as many people know, this is the biggest pain right now with vibe coding. It's like you ask it to do one thing, it might not entirely understand you, and it did it, but messed up another thing, or it didn't do exactly what you wanted. And so yeah, there's
Yeah.
again two places, tests and specs, that I feel like we could be doing a
There's
better
still a
job.
horizon,
Yeah,
both on Base44 is its own app, and in the apps created on top of it.
yeah,
Let me you actually touched on something I wanted to ask, which is about team members. And so this has been sort of super interesting. You built them. Also, you can zig and zag because you're just you, and so the LLM changes. You changed your opinion. You feel like a thing. You don't need to convince anybody else or align them.
yeah.
Now, post acquisition, I guess maybe first it's a question like what do you anticipate will happen? I say anticipate, you have a plan probably in terms of growing the team. Do you still think, hey, we're going to be 3 people, we'll triple the size of the team, or do you think you're going to be 30? And then how much is the methodology that you've described viable when it's a team or multiple teams that need to collaborate versus a solo developer?
My core thesis is that for building great software now, you need way smaller teams. It's not actually that like it's actually that if you're smaller, you'll be like it will be easier, because when you're smaller, you have more context, right? I'd rather have someone that knows entirely the repository so that they can change multiple things at once.
Mm-hmm.
Um, well, the way I'm structuring the team right now, so is keeping very lean and efficient in terms of like team member for every, I don't know, million or $2 or $3 in ARR, and then having those team members with as wide context as possible. So I don't want any more of like this, hey, I built this part of the back and now I'm going to hand it over to the other person that will build the user interface, will hand it over back to build like a different thing. Oh, now we have an infra problem, so we need the third guy. And so I'm trying to build a team very small. All of them have like a lot of context. And the way that I'm trying to manage the tasks is isolate as much as possible, and like have every
Yeah.
person to work almost like as an individual. So take like big chunks of your product, hand it over to this person. This person is gonna work mostly alone. It's like I want to see very few team meetings of like syncing on something, because like you can now again every person becomes like, if you hire a 10x engineer nowadays, there are 1,000x engineers, because
Yeah.
they can like throw as many AI coding agents as they want, and it's not anymore about, oh, this task is really big, so I should be putting like 4 or 5 people on it, because again, it's not anymore about the amount of code that every person writes. Like his AI can write as much code as you want
Right.
it to.
Yeah,
It's
there's
more
probably
about like
still
the
a case for for pairs, in the sense, at least for the single, like someone goes on vacation, right,
yeah,
or leaves the company or
yeah,
such. Then
I agree.
one person sounds makes me like a little bit uncomfortable, but I get the point about tiny teams. That's
Yeah,
fine with
I
me.
agree. And also like it's very hard to find people who are also
Yeah,
they're awesome with backend, but they also understand some design and they also understand some like front end concepts and so on. But as much as I can, I'm trying to like keep a small team, and then the way they operate is like divide and conquer.
yeah. And you anticipate them working in the same fashion, give or take. And the solution to that is architecture, and just sort of
And
isolation
setup,
from
yeah,
things. Yeah, which again is actually not new. It's actually the way that you would scale the Amazon sort of two pizza teams. When I think about how we build Tessl, it is about having software boundaries, having data model boundaries, and eventually even aiming to allow timeline independence of being able to ship whenever it is that you ship. And all of those are
yeah,
never perfectly correct, but they are they are aspirational. Like you want to invest in ensuring those lines are there, and that makes sense. Um,
yeah. I agree with
let's
that.
maybe veer off. So we're kind of like tight on time here on it. Maybe we should we talk a little bit futures? Like we talked a lot about sort of past and present, and I think we talked about like near future. Um, Maybe I'll start with the big question of like, what do you envision developers being, in 1 year, 3 year, 5 year horizons? Like what is still in the realm of a developer? Um, what do you think just entirely goes away?
Yeah, obviously, I measure it as like the percentage of software that could be built today with tools like Base44 and other tools in the category. Um, and again, I want to differentiate between the Cursor and Cloud Code of the world
Mm-hmm.
that are obviously targeting developers, semi-developers, versus like the Base44s of the world that are targeting like the everyday architect, lawyer, physician,
Yeah, they're
also
expanding
product
the
people.
definition of a developer, right? You're
Yeah,
taking coding as literacy to a different place, and it's not coding as literacy; it's software creation as literacy. It is about making it available to everybody.
yes, absolutely. So I think there, obviously, the percentage of software that could be built is going to increase tremendously. Two places that I find that really, at least I'm putting a lot of focus on is on the enterprise side. So again, if I'm putting it on like a timeline, so vibe coding has started building great websites. It was really fun to see that you can build a landing page, maybe some interaction, but great with front end.
Mm-hmm.
And then Base44 targeted a lot of like build a functional app, like a project management tool, CRMs, invoice management apps, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing now more and more organizations adopt Base44 to build like internal tools, to build back office systems, to build like things that they used to like pay a lot for like custom software. Um, and then so there's two vectors that we really need to get better at, like as a category. One is the enterprise side of things, like build enterprise grade applications that can really transform the way organizations are being built. Every large organization has tons of software needs. And I think like a small percentage of it is like customer facing. Uh,
Yeah.
but a lot of it is like think of an organization like I don't know Pepsi or something like that. Like how much software do they need internally to run
Yeah.
this business? And the more the merrier, right? The more that you build tools, the more that you build automations, the more that the business becomes more
Yeah.
efficient. So
Can
there's a
I
lot that yeah.
challenge? Like, I don't actually want to challenge that. I agree with it, but I think there is a thesis that says, yes, a lot of like the enterprise automation is a massive opportunity. Just think about how much grunt work happens and how much inefficiency happens. If you could just easily create software to create, will make it go away. But there is a thesis that says, well, you wouldn't create applications; you will just delegate those tasks to agents, and so you wouldn't create code that lives as an application the way we perceive it today, you would more outsource it to AI.
So that's the second thing, which is lately I've been telling the team that vibe coding is awesome, obviously made me rich, but it's currently great at building software the way it used to look pre 2022, 2023, when ChatGPT came out. It's still very hard to build agentic applications. And I think a lot of like the value in software and the latest like groundbreaking software, and Base44 is a good example of that, is going to become like agentic software. And I think we'll find that it's not only chat and like connect tools, there's like something to correct there. You can see that in coding agents, in the UX and whatever. It's like there's some interaction, but it's a different kind of software. And so the second thing that Base44 is going to invest a whole lot in, and we'll see a lot of like updates in the near future, is helping everyone build agentic software. An agentic software could be a software like Base44. It could be that the CRM that you just vibe coded now has an embedded agent that can research leads, can send you some updates before a meeting, can enrich some data. It can be that the support ticketing system that you've built internally for your SaaS company will now have an agent that auto replies and gets trained on like human responses, and you'll be able to actually vibe code this whole application. And so yeah, I agree with you, definitely. I think there's like a combination of like things that like enterprise grade you need either way, whether you're building a nice looking web app or an actual agentic web application. But yeah, the other thing is like taking vibe coding to the place where you can build great agentic applications.
So with all of these advancements and all the capabilities that Base44 is building, like what's your prediction about how long does it take till you can build a Base44 with Base44?
That's a good question. And it also has to do with like how much we will be able to crack this agentic application thing. My guess is like a fully functional Base44 app with like payments and credits and like actually coding agents that are coding like websites inside and so on. About 6 months.
6 months.
Maybe less. Yeah. I'm looking at sometimes it's like I'm looking at the state of where vibe coding and Base44 specifically was at 6 months ago, and it was just terrible. So I think 6 months, maybe less. Definitely, I would say not more than a year.
Yeah. I mean, it's a bold claim, but it's one that I can get behind, and I also think that not anybody could create a Base44. Like you'd need certain sort of skills and competencies to be able to achieve it, but maybe you can use it with those tools. And I guess in that context, like what is the long-term differentiation, for a platform like Base44, given this prediction?
Yesterday, I think 2 days ago, I tweeted about something that was like insane to me, where we changed like one line of code. It's like changed the string, and we moved the 400K workload for like $400,000 from one LLM vendor to another. And I was like, where's the moat? Like, this is insane, because like you see those companies and they're really growing like nicely, but where is this all headed if everything becomes a commodity, and maybe models at some point become a commodity? So I think the model layer is in a slightly more problematic way. I wouldn't actually call it problematic. It's very easy to switch, so there's no real moat, but the top players are just printing cash. And so I think
it's hard to enter that group now. You move between the group, but it's harder to imagine someone entering the group now.
Yeah, but it's gonna be a very interesting market, because it's unlike the cloud, let's say, vendors. So obviously, it's also a very hard ticket to get in, but it's also very hard to switch between clouds. Right? It's very hard to take your entire setup from Microsoft Azure to AWS. this won't be the case between models, because when a new model comes out and it's slightly better, then for me it's like, yeah, I'm going to spend like 5 minutes and change and move like hundreds of thousands of dollars a month, and probably in the future even more, from one vendor to another. Where is the moat? There's many places. So one, just being ahead, right? If you're 4 months ahead of the competition these days, it's very important, right? So I know, I know that some of Base44's competitors are going to come up with like a built-in backend and batteries included kind of like approach of like you're seeing kind of like what it does to Base44's users. But at that point, we'll already be like further ahead. And so, yeah, just velocity is I think that's the number one moat, but there's also brand distribution, community. I think Base44 is likely to have the strongest community that I've seen. It's like users are absolutely fantastic and they help each other. And yeah, there's still some places where a unique product take that's hard to replicate is insanely important. So if you can, like, again, for me, and not to sound too cocky, but like, I was like, okay, there's this problem with building functional apps in vibe coding, and for building for like the non-technical person, I can envision how this experience should look like. They should just type something. They don't need to understand what a database is or whatever. Everything will be built, and then translating that into how to implement that from a tech perspective, and in a scalable way, because like people build, I think, tens of thousands of apps a day nowadays, and so how do you scale that and hold this whole thing and the back end and whatever? Like, how do you do that? There's still
So
some
product
technical
based
moat.
velocity, like make good decisions and execute on them fast.
Yeah, and it's
That's
the
really
same
your
thing,
result.
right? Yeah, it's the same thing. Because if you make good decisions and great decisions from an architectural standpoint, then your velocity will be
Right.
So I think that's a big moat.
Yeah, it's good. Sounds like a great kind of equal cry almost. Like you do have the brand, you do have the distribution. So especially now within Weeks, and so it's not an equal playing ground, but it is more equal maybe than ever before, as you've demonstrated. So I guess maybe just as a final question here, what's the sort of the top advice you'd have for developers listening to this podcast, like as they brace themselves to the sort of insanity that is engulfing us and change? What's sort of the top advice for a developer today?
The way I think the future is headed is that people who can jump between domains, so at least understand a little bit between domains so that they can execute with AI agents things end to end, will be more successful than the people who are currently very deep into something. So there's like a great front end developers that understand the ins and outs of React. I think that won't be as valuable as people who can execute end to end, again, together with AI agents and have some understanding of front end, great understanding of back end, some understanding of design, some understanding of like UI, and can take something, either a feature or build a product themselves, and can lead that end to end. So my advice for I think for developers and what I'm advising some of my friends is like, take a step back, go and build something end to end. It will teach you more about the other places that you haven't touched yet, like product and design and users and community and whatever. Depends on where you're at and what type of developer you are. But take a step back, try to build something, because I think the future will belong to people who have some understanding across domains. Because then you'll have AI agents specializing, and deeper understanding of syntax is not an advantage anymore. Like those agents will know, the LLMs will know way better than us what's the latest and greatest packages, how to use them, what's the syntax, and so on.
Right. Yeah. Super interesting. Basically, like elevate yourself up the list, and we talk about you need to either move up the product manager route of understand product better, or move up the architect route of sort of understand sort of system architecture. But either way, you have to broaden the perspective. Maor, this was excellent. Thanks a lot for coming onto the show. Massive congrats on the incredible journey, which I understand is just beginning. Still a lot of work ahead, which I look forward to following. But thanks for coming here and sharing all these insights.
Thank you, Guy. This has been awesome.
And thanks everyone for tuning in, and I hope you join us for the next one.